Rail route. Is it going to be a win or a bin? Let's have a quick read through of the description in Steam. In Railroute, you will design, construct, upgrade, and automate your railway network in one of the many maps based on real-life cities worldwide. Dispatch the trains to make the traffic flow and the network grow. Now, this game has actually been out for a couple of years now, and in early access, in fact. It's coming out for full release on the 22nd of February. That's tomorrow from the point of me recording it, and this will be released on that day. So what do you do here? This is essentially a massive puzzler strategy planning game, making sure things don't go wrong on your network. There's no graphics, it's just top down or even more of control center view. Imagine if you were working in the real dispatcher room, you've got these icons of trains moving around on these illuminated maps, really atmospheric, I've got to say as well, with the colors, and they just sort of make you think that you are watching this really intensive screen and making sure things don't go wrong. It does really well at capturing that, but you are there to make sure everything flows, develop technology, add things to the tracks, add timetables, plan routes, get the trains moving on time, just make sure they're not late. That's the idea, and it becomes harder and harder as more trains come onto the network. Of course it does. More and more balancing has to happen. The game starts off pretty much where you have to do everything yourself, but if you are playing endless mode, which I'll come to in a moment, you can add new technologies, as I say, to your network to try and automate a few things so you don't have to interfere as much. Now, you'll notice that in the video as it goes along, I've covered most of the footage from my tutorial session with a little bit from a session I did with a timetabled mission in a city, but most of it is from the tutorial level. So you're not going to see everything this game offers in this video, but you'll get, hopefully, a gist of what the idea is, certainly. On to the things I like. Well, the game pretty much throws you into a tutorial at the beginning, which is 100% required with this if you've never come anywhere near this game before. It teaches you things from the basics, which you're going to need to know, and it gradually takes you through learning more of the different technologies that you can add, and it gives you a little bit of freedom as well. It's linear to a point, but I have deviated off the track, excuse the pun, several times, and you're able to do what you want to an extent. There is a little bit of a story going on in the background, which is nice, but I like the way that the tutorial doesn't baby you, but it's enough to teach you what you need to know. If you want to go off on a tangent, absolutely, you can learn it yourself, or do a bit of the tutorial until you feel comfortable and then play one of the other game modes. So there are 3 game modes. There is Rush Hour, and that one is where you pick a city. By the way, these are real world cities, so there's loads and loads of different locations that you can have and all stations within these cities. And there's an amazing Steam workshop as well where people have added their own systems on, and you can play pretty much, well, I wouldn't say any city in the world, a lot of the major cities in the world, but have a look and see what's on there. But anyway, Rush Hour, it increments the game speed and challenge as you begin. So you start off with effectively no infrastructure in a city with different stations. You can then start adding lines yourself and taking on contracts, and things just get thrown at you time and time again, and it becomes harder and harder and harder, and eventually, presumably, it becomes impossible. I haven't got that far, by the way, in Rush Hour mode. Presumably, things become so hard that you either just fail, because as soon as you have a train crash, game over, or you just give up. I've only looked a little bit at the Rush Hour mode, but I get the idea, so sorry if anything was slightly inaccurate there, but that's just me sort of playing it briefly and reading the description of the mode. The one that I play most of, and is the one that's in the tutorial version, is endless mode, and that's the one, as it says in the tin, endless up until you end up with too much going on and trains crash, game over, or again you find it too hard. But the only difference between endless and Rush Hour that I can see is that you have the tech trees that I have mentioned, unlocking things to try and make your life easier, automated signaling, automated track control, so many different things. There's actually loads and loads of things in these tech trees, which is a positive in its own right. And it's fun just to unlock a few of these things as I have and implement them onto your track. Some of them are slightly complicated. Each technology does have a little textual description, but some technologies have their own little tutorial, which is really cool because you can click to do a tutorial before you develop it, and then you can come back out of the tutorial, pick up where you left off implement the technology so you know what you're doing. It's a really good idea. Tutorials within tutorials. Final game mode is Timetable, and I quite like this one. I would say this is probably my favorite once I got to grips with the mechanism of the game. So you pick one of loads of cities. Again, Workshop will provide you with more. And you pick a city, and the designer of the level has already decided how many trains are going to be coming into the game, from which direction, and their destinations. It's just your job to balance it and do it as quickly and as efficiently as possible without messing up. So a train comes onto the map, you know where it's got to go, you've got to get it there, and as you're doing that, more and more trains are filtering on. And again, it's the puzzle strategy element that I said right at the beginning. You have to think so hard. When am I going to move him? Oh, he needs to leave at this time. He needs to arrive here at this time. Oh, and he's going to be waiting at this station for this long, but I can move this train past this station and then he can move in afterwards. Oh, there's so much to think about. But it's brilliant. And then you get a little score at the end. So if you do really well, you get a high score. I don't think you get anything off the back of that apart from a sense of achievement, or you can get a low score, in which case a massive sense of failure. But I love it. I absolutely love that game mode. So addictive and plenty of choice, as I say, in terms of maps. The user interface is, I think, good overall. It's a bit difficult to get to grips with initially. The tutorial does its best at explaining, and I think that's fine. But there's quite a lot of things to consider, things you can click on. They all do different things. It just takes a little while to get used to. But visually, the game overall, I think, is superb. If you combine that with the user interface and the overall feel of the game, the lighting and the actual darkness and the light of the game, it's fantastic. I think it's captured brilliantly. Everything's color coded, so the stations have their own colors, the different trains have their own colors to match the station where they're heading. I think it just looks nice. There's no real graphics to this at all, but it looks nice, and it's all it needs to be. This is a positive, so hear me out. But I found this game, for me, in the end, I mean, I understood it, and I got the premise of it, and I played it, and I enjoyed it, and I did win some levels. But I found as it went on, and it became harder. Yes, that's the point, but it was too hard for me, and because of that, I did lose interest. That is 100% not the game's problem. That is me, and it's my own personal thresholds with my limit of how far I want to be challenged before I say, you know what, I'll just go and play something else. The game is very good. It's well designed, it's well cared for, well developed, well optimized, no issues at all. It's a tricky game, and I wouldn't say personally it's a game for me or a game I would say I absolutely loved it. However, I love the game, but I don't love it. That's quite a hard thing to put across. But the game, for people who would like this genre and complexity and challenge, would love it. There's really not too many bad things about this game, in all honesty. If I was just to be picky, there's two separate tech trees. There's a red one and a green one. You have to unlock a certain amount of money and points for doing certain contracts and getting as many trains to places in time. Anyway, you get these points that you can spend on tech. Red is for regional and freight, and green is for commuter and intercity trains. I personally think it'd be better to keep them in one tech tree, although I get why they might be separate because they do different things. But to have two separate tech trees for something that's already quite complex in the amount of tech you have and the functionality those techs have, it would be much better to keep them in one screen because you do have to flip between the two. I prefer them in one place. Maybe still have them color coded if you must have green and red, but to have them on two separate screens, I just find that a little bit annoying at a picky level. However, a final not so good thing about the game is I found when adding track, because you get these blockers, you see, you can't just go line to line or station to station. Imagine there's like real life city obstacles in the way. You can't just build a train track through it. So sometimes you have barriers and blockers, and a track has to go in a certain direction, which of course angles the track. Now, for me, and I did this a couple of times, I built track, and it turned out that the train couldn't actually go on it because the angle was too tight. No, it wasn't a 90-degree angle or anything ridiculous. I know how a train can operate. But in my mind, when I was building the track, the angles didn't seem that great. But it turns out the train couldn't make that angle. So I had to take the track out. Sometimes I messed up the contract because the train obviously couldn't get to where it wanted to be on time. If there was a way of knowing that what you were drawing a train could handle, in terms of the track you've drawn and the angles, that would be better. Just some indication, unless I'm missing it. Maybe there is something there. but it would save you having to remove the track and start again. Overall, I really like this game, as I said earlier, as a game. For me, I don't like it so much because it's probably just not for me in a few different respects. But the game itself, I cannot take away how good it is. I love how good it is and how well designed and cared for it is. It's just perhaps not for me, but do not let that detract. This is a positive review, and I'm going to give this a very good score.